How the mighty have fallen. Maybe it's maybe a phrase that you're familiar with. Perhaps you've said it from time to time. I don't know. A rare occasion. I've heard it. I've heard this phrase said several different ways. Sometimes I've heard it said kind of sarcastically, like they didn't like the person who was in charge, and like, how the mighty have fallen, or kind of mockingly. That phrase has come up. Maybe you've heard it with genuine sorrow, how the mighty have fallen, and there's actual grief with that statement. We're going to look at that phrase today. I believe I know where it comes from. I think it comes from the passage we're going to look at today in the Bible. It comes up 3 times at the least, so quite possibly. But a little bit of background. Perhaps you know the story of Philip Yancey. I don't know if you know the name Philip Yancey. He wrote quite a few very popular Christian books in American. He confessed recently to an 8-year affair. It caused quite a stir in America. One might say of Philip Yancey, how the mighty have fallen. They might say that. Or before that, there was Ravi Zacharias. I don't know if you remember him, but he, an incredible, what we call Christian apologeticist. It's a very, very big word for he was good at arguing. But he was very, very good at defending the Christian faith and explaining things. And yet after his death, it was revealed that he had a woman problem that was pretty significant. You might say of Ravi Zacharias, how the mighty have fallen. People that God anointed that failed badly, and the consequences of those failures. And these are hard issues for us as Christians. How do we respond? How do we react? What do we do with the stuff they wrote that's on our shelf? Do we pull it off because we're embarrassed? Do we keep it there? Do we never talk about it again in church? Well, what do we do with these moments where people disappoint us? We're going to talk about that a little bit today. Like I said, this phrase, how the mighty have fallen, comes up in a song that David wrote. And unlike most of David's songs are in the book of Psalms. The book of Psalms is the Hebrew songbook, and most of the songs David wrote. So when we talk about songs David wrote, we find most of those in the book of Psalms. This particular song is embedded right in the text. It's right in Samuel. We're going to be in 2 Samuel. We've finished 1 Samuel, and the Psalms that go with that, we're jumping into 2 Samuel. Here's some background about what we've been doing. We've been doing a series on the life of David, matching the events of his life from 1 and 2 Samuel to Psalms that talk about how he felt and how he prayed in the midst of those events. So that's what we've been doing. And this time the song is right there, like I said, at the beginning of 2 Samuel. Here's some background we need to know to understand this song. So far we've studied David's rise and power and fame. There's another king at first. His name is King Saul. And he's king as David is rising in power. And at first, King Saul loves this guy. I mean, he's all over it. He really thinks David is great. But it doesn't take long before he's overcome with jealousy and starts to chase David down. And he's trying to kill him. For years, he is hunting David down. And he does some atrocious things in the process of trying to kill David. Like really bad stuff. He's desperately hunting David down like a dog. David not only evades Saul, David shows compassion and mercy when he has a chance for revenge. And we had a sermon on that topic earlier, a few sermons ago, the heart of mercy, where despite Saul's attitude and actions, David, because of the man he is, decides to show mercy instead when he has the opportunity. In 1 Samuel chapter 28, 3 through 25, if you read those, you'd have an account of Saul making one last horrible mistake. He consults a spiritualist to bring the prophet Samuel back from the dead so he can get some advice. And the end result is that the spirit of Samuel predicts the death of Saul and his son the very next day, which of course comes true. And so as we start 2 Samuel, Saul is dead. And he's dead because of really, really bad stuff. Occultism, black magic type stuff, really bad things. This is the guy. And 2 Samuel chapter 1 picks up on David's reaction to the death of this guy, Saul. Keeping in mind that not only has Saul been clearly ungodly, but Saul has also treated David personally like garbage. I'm going to start with 2 Samuel chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, and then I'm going to skip to verse 10. So we're going to do 1 through 3 and then skip to verse 10. Now it came about after the death of Saul, when David had returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, that David remained 2 days in Ziklag. And it happened on the third day that, behold, a man came out of the camp from Saul with his clothes torn and dust on his head. And it came about that he came to David, that he fell to the ground and prostrated himself. Then David said to him, "From where do you come?" And he said, "I have escaped from the camp of Israel." Then we'll skip to verse 10. So I stood beside him. This is the man still giving his testimony. And he says he killed Saul, because I knew that he could not live after he had fallen. And I took the crown which was on his head and the bracelet which was on his arm, and I have brought them here to you, my Lord. I have skipped some of the details, but here's what's happened. Saul has died. David has returned from his own conquests, his own battles, and this dude shows up with Saul's crown and his stuff, and he says, "Hey, I've come to you, David, bringing you the trappings of the kingdom, and telling you that your foe that has been chasing you is dead, and I killed him." I feel from the context that this guy expects some kind of reward for his finishing off David's nemesis. But that verse 10 turns out to be a horrible mistake, because when we see David's reaction to his enemy's death, we get something very unexpected. Let's look at verses 11 and 12. Then David took hold of his clothes and tore them. So also did all the men who were with him, and they mourned and they wept and fasted until evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the people of the Lord, and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. See, let me tell you, I've skipped a few bits, but here's what David did to the guy that claimed he killed Saul. He executed him on the spot for killing the king. That's what had happened earlier. And here's David's genuine reaction to Saul's death. It is sorrow. It is sorrow. In verses 13 through 16, we read where David judges this man on the spot and kills him. And that reaction may seem extreme to us, and maybe it was extreme, but it proves David's heart. In the aftermath of Saul's death, David writes a song, and he makes it public. It's the social equivalent of making a Facebook post or maybe an official media statement. This is David, who was well known by everybody as a massive war hero. And Saul, the king, was well known by everybody as well. And now it looks like David's going to be the next king, because when Saul died, so did Jonathan, the heir. All of Saul's family that could be king are dead. Looks pretty obvious David's going to be king. So here's the question. What is he going to say? What's his public statement about his predecessor? What is it? This is the soundbite. This is the media release. What does the new king, how is he going to talk about the old guy? That's what this song is. This song is his Facebook post. It's his media release. It's what he's publicly going to say about a guy that was absolutely wretched to him and deserved to be called out. Let's see what actually gets written. It's in verses 19 through 27. Let's start with verse 19. Your beauty, O Israel, is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Your beauty, O Israel, is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Not your embarrassment has finally been cut away. Not the thorn in your side that kept you from success has finally died. Your beauty. David in this moment and throughout the song chooses to look at the positives of Saul and Jonathan. He describes Saul as Israel's beauty. How the mighty have fallen in this context feels sad. It does not feel condemning or haughty or sarcastic. It sounds genuine. Your beauty has fallen. How the mighty have fallen. Let's keep going to verses 20 and 21. Tell it not in Gath. Proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon. Lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice. Lest the daughters of the uncircumcised exult. O mountains of Gilboa, let not dew or rain be on you, nor fields of offerings. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul, not anointed with oil. Gath and Ashkelon are key places in the Philistine country. He's saying, what I don't want is it's told by the Philistines, they don't want them mocking our dead king. Certainly don't want them mocking what I said about the dead king. The mountains of Gilboa is where Saul died. And David's inviting the mountains where Saul died to just join in the mourning. Let there be no rain or dew, nor offerings, because that's where Saul died. David had no interest in dishonoring the name of Saul or the dignity of his country. He refused to brag at the expense of his king's memory. And like I said, he calls even on the mountains where Saul died to join in grief. Let's look at verse 22 now. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, and the sword of Saul did not return empty. David recalls the victories of the fallen. He remembers their contributions rather than their failures. Look, David could have easily written a song 3 times this long about all the bad stuff Saul had done. Saul had done plenty of stupid stuff. He instead chooses to write this one about the victories that Saul had. Let's keep going into 23 and 24. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and pleasant in their life, and in their death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you luxuriously in scarlet, and who put adornments of gold on your apparel. David compliments his personal enemy and rightly recognizes that his country was more prosperous and more comfortable and safer under the rulership of Saul than it had been before. See, before there was a king, there had been infighting, there had been problems. The children of Israel actually had been fighting each other, and they were like, we need to solve this, we got to fix it, we want a king, and there was a little bit of discussion about that. But the truth of the matter is, Israel as a country was more prosperous, safer, and better under King Saul than it had been before. And David was true enough to reality to ignore all of the mistakes that Saul made to look at the few things that were right. He said, don't ignore the successes. Things got better. He made a lot of mistakes, but things got better. He doesn't say the mistakes part. He just says things got better. The mistakes are in the background. Now David's song moves to his personal friendship with Jonathan, the son of Saul, who also died. If you went back to 1 Samuel chapter 19, we have an account of how Jonathan saves David from his own father. And the friendship between the two men is well recorded. Here's a little section of the song that David dedicates to his really good friend, Jonathan. This is verses 25 and 26. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of battle. Second time. Jonathan is slain on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You have been very pleasant to me. Your love to me was more wonderful than the love of women. I love these words. They speak of genuine, powerful, meaningful male relationships, of which, guys, we don't have nearly enough of. When we have really good male friendships, we are stronger and we are better. And David is mourning one of those relationships that he treasures as one of the most powerful relationships of his entire life. It does make me sad to know how these words have been twisted to support an agenda. The gay community has used these words to support the idea that David and Jonathan were lovers. No. Just no. First, David was so attracted to women that he saw a woman bathing on her roof, wants her so badly that he sends for her to have sex with her, and then kills her husband to get away with it. David clearly digged chicks. Obviously. Second, Leviticus 18:22 clearly says that men are not to lay with men the same way you would lie with a woman. Leviticus calls it an abomination. In all the writings of David and all the songs of David and everything, David never, in any of his writings, brags about breaking one of God's laws. In fact, he says he loves God's laws. Psalm 119:97 says, "Oh, how I love your law. It is my meditation all the day." What a picture of love for God's word that leads to meditation on it all day long. David admits many times to breaking God's law. He does. He says, I broke it, and I hate that, and I'm sorry. David had never, at no point in all of David's writings does he ever claim to be perfect. He admits to breaking it. Here's what he never once does, ever. He never brags about breaking it. If this verse was about being gay, about gay sex, it would be the sole example of David flaunting that he didn't care what God's law said. It would be 100% out of character, and that is a horrible way to interpret the Bible. Never, for the sake of your own point, interpret anything in a way that makes it the sole exception to everything else. That is just a bad way to interpret anything. It's bad logic, it's bad theology, and we can use that tactic to support or criticize anything at all. And I point this out less to talk about the topic of homosexuality, because I really don't want to talk about that, and more to protect the value and truth of what's being said. If these words mean, I love you, Jonathan, because our sex was better than sex with women, suddenly we have a cheap bedroom talk in the midst of a serious ode to powerful friendship, and it ruins the real power and meaning of the verse. It just becomes super cheap and quite crass for being right here in the middle of this ode. Even more, the relationship between David and Jonathan was richer and truer or more beautiful than reducing it down to sex allows it to be. David is grieving the loss of his truest friend, and that is a grief we can all relate to. All of us would be gutted if our truest friend died tomorrow. And that's what this is about. This is about whoever it is in this world that you trust the most, love the most, would reach out to, male or female, I don't care who it is. If they died tomorrow, you would grieve, and it would hurt, and you would be dealing with it, and it would be painful. That's what we need to understand about what David's going through in this verse. That's the message. David lost his truest, best friend, and it hurts. Here's what he's saying. As much as David loves women, and his actions say he really, really loves women, he's proclaiming that he would rather have his friend back than to have sex ever again. That's what he's saying. And that is a powerful statement of friendship, of his camaraderie with the crown prince. Verse 27. How the mighty have fallen, third time, and the weapons of war have perished. When David says this, he means it. He means they were mighty. This isn't sarcastic and this isn't mocking. David sees these men as mighty servants of God, even Saul, who had so many problems. You know, in Matthew 5:43 and 44, we can read where Jesus says this, "You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven." Jesus radically tells the people, love your enemy. Way before Jesus said it, David did it. way before those words came out, and we made that part of how we understand relationships. And you know what? As a New Testament Christian, and many of us know that, and that's now part of how we view things. That is not how the Israelite people viewed that topic. They didn't think of their enemies as their neighbors. Yet David, even long before Jesus came and clarified that little truth, David's heart is the way it's supposed to be. And he genuinely loves Saul, though Saul in no way deserves it. In no planet does Saul deserve the love David shows him, the honor David shows him, the care David shows him. David's Facebook post after Saul's death illustrates love and respect that Saul did not deserve. And this is a beautiful song of remembrance, and it's an example of how we should recall even those who have wronged us. And there's some key ideas here that we should take from this. So we've got them up here. First of all, the mighty can and do fall. Just because we're successful today doesn't mean we can't fail tomorrow. And anybody who gets it in their head that they're immune from failure tomorrow because of how awesome they are today is just setting them up for failure. They are ready to go down. Just because Phil Yancey fell, on the other hand, just because someone fully falls today doesn't mean they weren't mighty yesterday. Just because someone falls today doesn't mean they weren't mighty yesterday. Just because Phil Yancey fell doesn't mean everything he wrote is wrong. Ravi Zacharias still wrote great apologetics. They aren't less great because of his fall. And let's just look at David himself. David ends up committing adultery and murder. We still read the Psalms. We don't say we don't have to read those anymore because David turned out to be a jerkface. His fall never undid the value of what God did through him. Human failure is possible in the people we hold in the highest regard. We must continue always to be diligent to protect ourselves from falling, and to be careful about discrediting everything God did through someone just because they failed. Here's an important thought. God can speak through failures, and God's voice must not be ignored regardless of what vessel it came from. I'm going to say that again. When God speaks through someone, it doesn't matter who he spoke through. What matters is that it was God's voice. When God speaks, if he spoke through that chair, we don't care whether it came through the chair. God's voice has to be responded to. It doesn't matter where it came from. Point number 2. Publicly discrediting others ultimately shows us our own problem. Why did David feel no need to publicly humiliate Saul? Why? All that stuff we did this morning about recognizing the power of God, seeing the power of God, living in the power of God, understanding that what God does was effective, David knew that so well. And because David knew that so well, his self-confidence was never in jeopardy. People dig into other people and discredit them publicly because of their own insecurities, because of their own need to pump themselves up at the expense of someone else. David didn't have that problem. David was confident in his relationship with God and had no need to grind somebody else's fate in the dirt to support his own personality. He didn't need to be in control, and he didn't need anything Saul had. David wasn't jealous of Saul. David's character and relationship with God are illustrated in his reactions to Saul throughout their relationship, both the mercy before and his great grace now. Saul is the aggressor. David endures with grace. And if we were to reverse the qualities of David, then what characteristics do people have that feel compelled to publicly discredit people that they don't like? Insecurity in themselves or God's sovereignty and their relationship with God, a need to be in control or desire for what somebody else has, jealousy of what other people have or an authority that they've been given. We need to watch our own reactions as a diagnostic of where we really are with God, because when we act ugly, it's a diagnostic not just of the ugly moment, but what's inside that created that ugly moment. What's dwelling in me? What attitudes do I have? What weaknesses are in my character that resulted in that ugly moment? That's a pretty good question we should ask ourselves after the ugly moment. I've had some ugly moments where I said things I wish I could take back. I have one from when I was probably 19, and I am a lot older than 19. And it's so petty and so ugly. And in this particular case, I never got a chance with that person to ever say sorry again. And it haunts me to this day. And it haunts me because that moment reveals who I was, and I wasn't very good right then. I was a mess. I was not secure. I was not okay. I was broken. I was seriously messed up. And out of that came these horrible words. And it isn't just the words. Where did those words come from? Next, grace demands seeing everyone's contributions, even if we don't like them. If we read 1 Corinthians 13, it's famous. It's called the love chapter. It's Valentine's Day yesterday. It would be very appropriate to read the love chapter. It's not that kind of love. There's a whole section about what it means to love, though. And if you read that section, it's quite long. There is nothing in there that supports anything else but seeing the best in other people. There's nothing in there at all except believe in other people, believe the best about other people. It is embedded in there. That is part of love, that when we have a choice on how to view someone's actions, that we will purposefully choose the best possible choice by default. We will assume the best possible reason, not the worst. That's part of loving people. Once again, we can use this to diagnose ourselves and others. Do we see the best in other people? How often? Or do we see the worst in other people? And what does that say about us? Or the person trying to criticize me. Is the person criticizing me, do they see the best in anyone or only the worst? See, if someone's criticizing me and I look at their life and they just are angry at everybody, maybe their motivation isn't love. And maybe if their motivation is love, I don't need to take that on board. I don't need to listen to that too hard. I don't need to let that bug me and sit in the back of my head. If this is a person that just criticizes everybody and everything, is just hateful all the time, and then they say this thing to me, well, I guess I get to join the club of all the other things they hate. Little point taking it too hard. They hate a lot. That's them. I don't have to accept hate. Lastly, David is very careful and complimentary in his public statements. David cares about the stability and reputation of his country. Remember that part where he said, let it not be said in our enemy's camp that these bad things happen. David cares about the reputation of other people and other countries, and he's making a public statement, and he's careful about that. David does not act in a way that brings discredit upon himself, his people, his adversary, or his God. And people who do act that way, once again, are demonstrating something deeply flawed in themselves, more than that they're demonstrating the accuracy of their complaint. And as we're talking about seeing the best in other people and proclaiming the best of other people and overlooking the faults of other people, let's not forget what Jesus did for us. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. While we were a mess, Jesus fixed us. And what does Jesus proclaim us, whether we deserve it or not? Priests, saints, forgiven, holy, worthy, fixed. Because Jesus exemplifies even more anything that David could do well. And that is, he has seen the best in every single person, despite their own failures. Let me finish with this. Would you please pray for me and my family? as we think of how the mighty have fallen, as we think about the dangers that go with spiritual leadership. Would you pray that we would not fall? How the mighty have fallen is not a phrase I want to be true of me ever. I would really appreciate your prayers. I do not want to fall, but to pretend that I couldn't is foolhardy. Far better than I have fallen, mighty people of God. And don't just pray for me, but pray for other spiritual leaders as well that you know, and each other. Sometimes the mighty fall. Truth is that despite our best intentions, that fall almost inevitably damages the value of everything we've ever done. And to act as if we can't fall is dangerous. To stand together against falling is a great defense. But in the midst of this, we serve a powerful, mighty, perfect, pure, amazing God. And we love Jesus, who's able to redeem and restore and fix even the worst mistakes. And that's the power of God. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, it's so interesting to look at and read and understand David and why you refer to him as a person after your own heart. And God, I confess to you, I wish that earlier in my life I had realized that David was the man to emulate. There is so much richness from the way he interacts with other people. God, would you forgive me of the times when I have been less than gracious about someone else behind their back, or to their face, or anything else. People deserve to be treated with respect, even if they aren't acting like it at the time. And they deserve it because of what you've done in me. They deserve it because you've given me what I never deserved. Therefore, I am now responsible to give other people what they may not deserve. I'm supposed to do it anyway, because you deserve it. Because you deserve my change. Help me to always remember that how I treat other people isn't based on how I feel about them. It's based about how I feel about you. And every relationship I have with another person is a test. It's a testimony. It's a sign of my relationship with you. How strong is it? How real is it? Where is my confidence? Where is my strength? God, and that when my strength in you is pure, then my grace to others is real, because you put in me and you do in me what you have, what you are, and that's who you are. You are forgiving and gracious and kind and long-suffering. And when you put that in me, when I rest in you, when we're together, then those qualities come out of me. Or did you cause us to be able to shrug off the attacks of people we don't need to listen to? Would you also cause us to continue to see the truth said by people who have made grave mistakes? It's a complicated world out there, God. But you've given us tools to navigate it. And we can do it together. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.